with a brand new book now available for pre-orders, In the Flow, which is a book all about journaling your inner wisdom. My publisher, Kate Adams, is going to come and interview me, and we're going to talk about journaling, about flow journaling specifically. And I think one of the things Kate and I will be talking about is how journaling can help us have the beginner's mind. So I can see that she's just entered the waiting room, and I'm going to let her in. Welcome to the Henny Flynn podcast, the space for deepening self-awareness with profound self-compassion. I'm Henny. I write, coach, and speak about how exploring our inner world can transform how we experience our outer world, all founded on a bedrock of self-love. Settle in and listen and see where the episode takes you. Hello, Kate.
Hi, Henny.
So we're going to dive into the conversation in a moment, but just to share with everyone who's listening that we've had a conversation just now, which has been a really beautiful reminder of why this work is so important. And we agreed that it would be useful to let everybody know that, because it might inform the way that we talk about the book, and it might inform the way that we talk about journaling, actually. So I think maybe the point really is that this is a conversation about grounding ourselves in a practice that can be really, really powerful in supporting us through things in life that can feel really challenging. And that's, yeah. Is there anything else to say on that, do you think?
No, I think, yes, you pointed out the timing of, that I had a message, which really is just sort of put me in a state of unknowing about something. And I said, well, I must tell you this, because otherwise you might think, oh, okay, it's not, not herself, not her usual self. And also, I might not, because I was excited to talk to you about your new book and all that kind of thing. But actually, when we chatted a little bit, we were like, oh, this is what it's all about. And because I have been fortunate enough, to work with you on this new book that we're going to talk about and develop a practice of journaling myself, that I now have that to turn to as one of the channels, of kind of developing a bit of understanding about something that's happening. Excuse my dog. And and just sort of a bit of self-reflection, I don't know, anything, but it gives you something, that can kind of, there's a bit of support there, exploration. Anyway, so it came up, and it just, we realized that it would probably infuse our conversation, because it's real life. And it's just come in, in the moment before we were going to chat. And it is what it's all about. Yeah.
That's right. And I think there's just something about that, as a oh gosh, I mean, a much wider practice than the sort of specifics, I can't even speak, the specifics of journaling, but the much wider practice of seeing, well, when something arises, what do I do with it? Or when something comes towards us externally, what do I do with it? Rather than being lost in the emotion or the thoughts that accompany it. And I think that's really how journaling has most supported me, is in being able to disentangle myself from the stuff and be able to see, well, what's actually going on? What am I actually feeling? And that, I think, in divine timing, Kate, you getting that message has kind of grounded this whole conversation in something that is much more than about recording a podcast episode about a book.
Yes, but it brings the books to life, and I think, yeah, and what we wanted to do, I wanted, as your publisher, to just have this opportunity to talk to you, sort of turn the tables on you, and yeah, and talk to you about your new book, which is In the Flow, journal your inner wisdom, and kind of give you a chance to reintroduce yourself to listeners, and new listeners, and that sort of thing, and ask you, yeah, kind of how how journaling is, part of the work you do, how you came to the work you do. Yeah, and kind of because it sort of sets the scene of why we decided to do journaling as the first title.
So I'm hearing sort of two questions in there. One about my background that led me to journaling, and then also about how journaling arose for
Yeah.
me. So my background is a long corporate career, um, where I think people who knew me maybe would have thought that I was pretty well connected to myself in some way. Um, you know, very empathetic, very good at noticing what other people were feeling. But what I wasn't skilled at was really noticing what I was feeling. And often the thing I was feeling was actually pretty awful, even though on the surface I would have been smiling. And it's not to say that, I was unhappy, because I really wasn't. But when I connected in with myself, um, often the emotions were pretty murky and difficult to be with, and all very tangled, really tangled. Um, you know, and simultaneously, in that beautiful paradoxical way of being human, with a lot of joy, with a lot of love, with a lot of lightness, and a lot of sort of pleasure in life as well. So, and I think that's complicated when we see those two things. And often what we tend to do is we'll go, well, I like this one, so I'm going to do more of that. And I don't like this one, so I'm going to turn my back on it. And what that leads to is suppression. And ultimately, I ended up getting very, very ill and almost died. It took me a long time to really, really recognize what impact that had had on me, and years. And also the sort of the threads of that experience, and how that there's a fear attached to that experience too. And what journaling did is it enabled me to reconnect, and I do think it is reconnect, with that inner, wiser part of me that was ultimately, and it didn't happen overnight, that is for sure, but that ultimately enabled me to be able to hold these two parts of myself in one space. There's one of my teachers who talks about, I see you in your pain, and I see you in your magnificence. And I think that's a big part of what the journal enabled me to do. God, I feel really emotional, Kate, actually. Very possible I might burst into tears.
But is it because it's the seeing yourself, which we do, we kind of, many people find it easy to see others, especially I think the kind of people, who listen to you probably. And but seeing ourselves is another step, isn't it?
Mm.
Which is
I
what I
think
guess part
I
of the
think
practice, isn't it?
I think that's absolutely right. I think it is. And I think that's one of the reasons why journaling can feel so incredibly vulnerable as well, because we are, well, we can have this sense of exposure. Um, and the important thing is remembering that um, the person we are exposing ourselves to is ourselves. And so there's this beautiful, virtuous circle of trust and love and trust and love and trust and love, which means that as you build that practice, so those two elements build as well. And we're more able to hold space for the stuff that is tricky. And I think there's something really important here, actually. I've realized, I think this is going to sort of dip in and out of lots of things as we talk, but I just sort of had this like real sort of sense inside me that it's really important when we begin this practice that we don't kind of set some expectation on ourselves of a whole load of should, I should now start exposing these deep, dark parts of me. Because, if you're ready for that, awesome, go for it. But maybe there's an opportunity to go really gently and really tenderly and listen and listen to what is coming out onto the page. And if you're not ready for that, what often gets called shadow work, then that's okay. Like, meet yourself where you are. And I think that's really what the journal is about meeting ourselves where we are.
Yes, and both all aspects, isn't it? Because there's a really compassionate part of yourself. There's the wise part, and there's strength, there's inner strength there, and yeah. And what I actually really love about because I think we have this idea sometimes that we should just know how to journal. That's kind of just, we should just know how to do it. But actually having this sort of gentle guidance, like you say, which I find, because I've read your book, many times, and I've been doing it myself, and it's this, it's kind of this other gentle guidance person, which is you, helping me create that safe space. It's not like you say, the questions are very open. So sometimes we might start by just saying, I don't know what to say. And you kind of, you encourage that, don't you? Like, how do we start?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something about that. It's funny actually, because I took my first journal, the journal that begins day one. It's not necessarily my first journal, but the journal that begins day one, off the shelf the other day. And I was looking at how my journaling practice has developed from then. But one of my observations is, I know through all the journal books that I've ever written in, there will be many entries where I am writing, I literally have no idea what to write now. This just feels so ridiculous. I feel, just irritated with myself for even beginning this journal today. What am I doing sitting here? And all of that is completely valid, because even if it ended there, it would still be valid. I just close the book and put it to one side. But the far more likely outcome is that by releasing that, something else is given the space to come through,
Yeah.
even if it's just a kind of I'll notice that I'm smiling rather than frowning as I'm writing, and I'll write, I notice that I'm smiling rather than frowning as I'm writing. Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, and that's part of the kind of the guide is this sort of very gentle thing of just reminding us how we can notice things, like, because we were talking before about how we could be very mind, sort of dominated by the mind as we go into this conversation, but we can practice noticing from different different ways, can't we? Or in different ways, which I
Yeah.
think, you really help with.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think that that's something that's such a lovely reflection. And I'd forgotten that we'd said that, but it's so true that um I think often we can approach a practice because we think, or we think we know that it's going to be good for us. We're up in the head. We think we know it's going to be good for us in some way. And so we approach it maybe from a wanting a particular outcome, wanting to feel a certain way, wanting to solve a problem. But one of the things about flow journaling, and hopefully this comes through in the guidance in the book, is the kind of openness, the sort of non-attachment to a particular outcome. It's allowing the words to flow, hence flow journaling. We're not trying to control it, which is up in the controlling mind. We're down in the body, in the heart, or down deeper in the belly, and just seeing what spills onto the page. And my own experience is that often that will be surprising in some way. Um, and that could mean so many things. I mean, but often it will be surprising. And I think that when something is surprising, that is when we know, oh, we're having a moment of insight. Because if we already know all the answers, that's not surprising. And therefore we're up in the head, we're up in the control mind. But when something is, oh, that's unusual, really wasn't expecting myself to write that, or that's not a word I would normally think about in that context. How curious. Then we're in the open, more expansive, reflective part of the mind, in terms of the brain. And we're in that, that sort of part that is curious, compassionate, and considered as well.
Yeah. And I know that it seems like such a simple practice. You need a piece of paper and a pen, pick up your pen. And I know you and I both are quite keen on the writing part, like sort of using a pen and using your hand. And but it is something that sometimes is quite hard to get into the habit of, isn't it? Or to know where to begin. And yeah, I wondered what you from your experience, what gets in the way of it, and how can a book like this help us kind of
So,
begin or develop, the practice?
so one of the things, so I do talk about it in the book, as you know, around sort of some of the things that can get in the way. And I think that one of the biggest things can be our expectations on ourselves. Um, the I think the other thing as well can be a sort of belief that we've got to be in the perfect place geographically, emotionally, mentally. Um, we have to have, a beautiful, ornate sort of thing to write in or on. We have to, have a gorgeous handwriting, and it's got to be this aesthetically pleasing experience. I mean, that's definitely one of mine. And actually, I think sort of playing with those thoughts can be so powerful. So I will, because I have like this high kind of aesthetic sort of value, which is a lovely trait and also can be a hindrance. So I will deliberately write sometimes on the back of an envelope, and write just as I would if I was writing in my lovely journal over here. And sometimes I'll deliberately choose uh to write with a pen that's kind of almost, I say deliberately, it's a sort of subconscious deliberation, if you sort of mean, but to write with a pen that's kind of hard to write with. And then I'll be like, what? Okay, so what's going on here? So rather than seeing that as a barrier, to writing and then giving up, I'll think, okay, this is interesting. What am I finding it hard to say here? So, I think also about sort of like the length of time that we journal as well can feel like a bit of a barrier. So, if we're in a busy house, and we don't have much time, work with what you do have rather than setting an unrealistic expectation on yourself. So I used to commute when I sort of in that corporate world. I used to commute 4 hours a day, and one of the things I experimented with for many, many, many months was journaling on the train, which, on one level kind of sounds, oh, that's lovely. You're sitting on a train and it's like, the trees are going past. Oh, that's a really lovely, poetic sort of thing. The reality was I was sitting on a packed commuter train, often standing, and I would use that as an opportunity to play with my journaling practice and to see what came up. And it was always useful, always in some
Yeah.
way, always
Yeah.
useful.
And would you say that journaling, I mean, I know the answer, but it kind of, because it can help whatever our day is, because things can be very mundane, can't they? We can go through a mundane patch and then something can hit us, or we want to make a change or sort of grow in a certain way. And it can help in that way. Is that something that you've kind of found over the years, that it's just adaptable?
Definitely. So when I look at my early journals, the reason why I began the one that says day one was because it was a commitment to journaling. It was okay, I'm doing this. I do talk in the book about how, uh, for me, I think it's preferable to begin with day one, day two, day three, rather than a date. Because what I had noticed, and the reason for shifting, was that when I was journaling with a date, it was another way to beat myself up. If I missed a day or a few days, I could see it because I could see the dates weren't, following each other. Um, so going back to, in those sort of that first journal that I've kept, um, gosh, I was in a massive, massive period of personal change. I mean, gigantic. Everything in my life changed. And the journal was like an anchor point as I, seesawed through feelings, thoughts, painful transitions and revelations of myself. As Anton said the other day, because I was talking about, for me, change is more about revelation than transformation. And then we were sort of saying, oh, it's like peeling the onion. And he said, yeah. And he said, and a lot of tears along the way. And it's it's so true. My journal was a place for myself to ground the huge changes that I was going through. And then those sort of changes went through a period of, consolidation, as they do, because we can't be endlessly in change. Um, and and there were times when I'd sort of write, oh, it's a bit boring. Like, when are things going to feel kind of exciting? And because you can get a bit addicted to like big transitional revelatory stuff. And then it was like, okay, so this is now the practice. Now the practice is what's the detail of what I'm experiencing? What's the detail of what I'm feeling here? And so then that became delicious. Being in the boredom was delicious. And and it's kind of, and now, like so many of us, I'm at a place where, I'll kind of bob along thinking things are okay. And then suddenly something will come. And having established the practice is what enables me to manage in my own way. the stuff that is incredibly painful in my own life.
Yeah. And do you have prompts now that you've developed? Yeah, that you kind of you can return to, the sort of they come up because you need them, or yeah, sort of
So
that they kind of help you get in the flow.
yeah, and I still will use in fact I'll share the one that I wrote to today in a moment, but um so I'll still use prompts, and in fact I can't remember how many prompts there are in the book, but there are lots, and I have journaled to all of them, and since writing the book have returned to journaling to some of them again, because I think that's one of the things about prompts, is that each time you write to a prompt, it will be different. So it's not like it's once and done. They're always there for you. Um, but I also have a standard prompt that I use um, a lot, which is, "Are you there?" And I just begin, if I don't know, if I don't have a particular direction or something really specific that's in my mind or in my heart, in my belly, I'll just begin, "Are you there?" And the journal always responds. And it feels like the journal is responding. The journal always responds, "Of course, my love." And then I write, "What am I here to learn?" And the journal replies, "What is the question?" And that just, because it puts me into this place of like, oh, what is the question? And even if I don't know what the question is and I reply, "I don't think I have a question," then she'll, because she's feminine to me, she'll respond, "Then maybe there is no question, and maybe you're just here to write," or whatever. It would sort of take me off into some direction. But the prompt I had today. So yeah, so to answer your question, the place that I return to is, "Are you there?" But the prompt I had today, which was so gorgeous, and I wasn't expecting it, but it like came. And the prompt was, "As I write these words, my soul is singing." And it was just this sort of dot, dot, dot. And it was like, okay, so like, what is my soul singing? And oh, okay, honestly, it was the the discovery within it was so beautiful. And it was about how birds sing, and they have no expectation. They don't worry whether their voice is going to be okay for the wider melody. They just sing, and they trust that whatever comes will create harmony. And oh, as a writer, as someone who shares things that go through me, same for you, I'm sure. Um, that uh that reassurance, just trust and love. Trust and love.
Yes. It's
Glad.
lovely because there's a creativity, and then there's a message in the creativity, or sometimes it's just creativity, and, and it seems to be, yeah, just what I love is this kind of journaling can just go in so many different directions, because you can ask a question, about a quite a specific problem, or like, what am I going to do about this? Yeah, and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
see what comes, or I wonder what I think about that. And just there are so many, like, as you gradually, undo the taps, kind of, yeah, because initially you're like, I'm not quite sure how this works, and then, but yeah, you can start to kind of get inspiration, for what you're going to journal all over the place.
Mm.
Like, you might
And I
see a poster with some words on it, and you think, oh, that's quite interesting, and then just jot that down. Yeah. So it's kind of, it can go anywhere, can't it? But it will take you where you where you're going to go, like each individual person.
And I think one of the most interesting things, I mean, this makes me sound really nerdy about, I'm a journaling nerd, but um, one of the most interesting things we can journal about is journaling. So if you know, one is finding a block about journaling, write about the block. What is getting in the way here? Can be a beautiful prompt. I mean, that's a gorgeous prompt, just generally, because often we don't even know that something is in the way. But if we begin with that prompt, it will often shine a light on something that we weren't necessarily aware of. Um, and and also sort of, or if we find that journaling feels a bit silly, because of course, like our lovely, egoic mind, is terribly, terribly worried about what other people might think of us for doing this, or how bonkers it sounds that you're having a conversation with this invisible party within your journal. um Write about that. Write about what all the thoughts are, and write about how you feel about having those thoughts. And then offer it up to the journal. Just say, well, what do I do with this? Maybe you do nothing with it. Maybe that's enough.
Um, I had a thought, but I got very wrapped up in what you said about the what's getting in the way. That's such a good prompt, such a good prompt. But yeah, I suppose I can't. Sorry, Teddy, I can't think what. You might have to cut this little bit.
No editing, because this is so
I
brilliant,
got
Kate.
wrapped up with what's getting in the way. I wrote
Brilliant.
it.
Brilliant. Because that is such a gorgeous, gorgeous uh, moment that actually illustrates something about the journaling process in itself, is that our head can suddenly turn up, and it can make it, we can have a thought, or we could lose our train of thought and then go into, oh, hang on a minute, that was something that was important, and now I feel bad that I've lost that train of thought. Or we might start editing what we're writing. So this is a really, really important part. I don't edit the podcast. I mean, and if it was like, 30 minutes of absolute silence, I'd probably chop that out, unless I was doing a meditation, in which case leave it in, of course. But, I don't
And the
tend
irony, sorry, the
to go.
irony is that now that the thought has come back to me, uh, it's a good one because it fits with what you're saying. Because my last thing was going to be to ask you uh, about your work with compassion and how it's the center of everything that you do, and bringing compassion to yourself and into the journaling. And you've kind of answered it for me, because you've given me compassion for just having a blank.
And showing ourselves that in the journal. I honestly feel that journaling saved me. I really do, because I think it enabled me to meet myself with love in a way that I had never been able to meet myself before. Which isn't to say that I wasn't loved, because I am and I was. And it isn't to say that I didn't know what love felt like, because I do and I did. But what journaling enabled me to do was to learn how to fall in love with myself in the most profound way. And I see that as being the foundation to all successful change, all successful change. And I kind of, I'd love someone to challenge me on that, because I'd really, I mean, maybe this is another podcast episode, Kate. You could challenge me on it, because um it feels so fundamental to me that when we love ourselves deeply and we show ourselves compassion, everything feels more possible. And I think that holding that would be my only there are no rules about how we do this work, but my only sort of my like deepest guidance would be to see the journal as a container that is bathed in love. Because then if we notice that the voice of the inner critic is coming in, we can say to the journal, help me respond here.
Yeah. Yeah.
This worries me, this frightens me, this makes me feel sad. How do I respond? And then allow the journal, that, and we can see the journal as being, our deepest, wisest self. We can see it as being, the universe. We can see it as being God with a capital G or a small g. It really just doesn't matter. Just doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that we respond kindly.
Yeah, and with love. I think, yeah, that's a wonderful note to kind of end on there, Henny. And I think you've really kind of given such a lovely flavour of journaling and bit of insight into it. And the book, I'm really thrilled. I'm starting up as an independent publisher with the Inner Work Project, and In the Flow is one of our first launch titles. It's going to be published on the 30th of May. And there's lots more about it on both your website and innerworkproject.com. So yeah, so I'm really thrilled. I'm really glad we did do this little turning things around and me interviewing you. It's been really great fun. And yeah.
And Kate, I want to say to you as well that how grateful I am that you saw me and that you saw this and trust me in this way. And that is a wonderful thing to be in receipt of. To be in receipt of someone else's trust is such an honor. And I think even with that, actually, it speaks to the quality of the relationship with the journal and how that can inform the way that we relate to others too. To be able to accept someone else's trust in us, and for that not to then become a kind of a catastrophic sort of sense of imposter sort of looming through us, because that could have been very easy for me to have gone into that place, but I didn't. I trusted that you trust me.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the things that journaling can help with too.
Yes. And we hope that goes through to the reader, don't we? Or the journaler, reader journaler, as we like to say. And because we both share this kind of quite strong conviction that people have such a well of wisdom that's within, isn't it? And we're often just given with the wisdom of others, but anything that can help us tap into our own and like you say, meet your true self. I just I love it. I love this stuff. I'm very lucky to meet people like you and work with you. So yeah. So thanks, Henny. That was really great. And I hope you enjoyed it too.
I did
Not
really
me.
enjoyed it. And yeah, it's just lovely to be able to really get inside what it is about something and remind ourselves about why it is so useful. Anything that raises awareness is useful. So Thank you so much, Kate. Honestly, it's just been lovely. And I'm so glad that we did, to your point, that we did continue the conversation, because it would have been very easy to have not spoken and to have said, oh, let's do it another time, which might have been the right choice on another day. But actually, it felt like it was such a lovely bedrock for
Yes.
meeting each other in this space.
Take care, honey. Bye.